Welcome, everybody, to Crystal Kyle and Friends. Today, we're going to be talking to a guy by the name of Scott Horton. He's a libertarian. I believe he's involved with, you said, antiwar.com?
Yep. He's the director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of antiwar.com, host of the Scott Horton Show, and has a lot of deep knowledge on the history and the current conflict, Israel's war on Gaza. So we want to talk to him all about that.
Yeah, and I think that stuff is really interesting because people generally have like a very foggy idea the further back you go what's going on with Israel. You know, once you get to... First of all, I don't know what percentage of people even know about the partition plan in the late 1940s, but like, what about once you get before that and you start talking about the founders of Zionism in like the early 1900s? So I want to do like a good, dry retelling of history from the very beginning of Zionism, and I think that'll be very helpful for people in terms of understanding the current conflict.
Absolutely. The more I have learned about that era, the more useful it has been for me understanding the entire project of Zionism and how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, because a lot of people see it as like pure good, pure evil, almost like a World War II Nazi situation where it's like, well, obviously those guys are the bad guys and everybody agrees to that. It's actually way more complicated when it comes to Israel, Palestine, and there's a lot of stuff that people don't know, but we're going to be happy to dive into all that. So before we do that, though, there was a little bit of a tussle, some might say, or back and forth between Ryan Grimm and Ted Cruz, which, by the way, I was surprised that they managed to get an interview. Like, Ryan got an interview with Ted Cruz.
Yeah, well...
that's like, so what? How'd that happen?
Okay, so Ryan and Emily Tashinsky, they co-host Counterpoints, my colleagues over there, and Emily has a lot of contacts in the Republican Party world.
Shame on her.
She was able to secure the Ted Cruz interview, and he's promoting some book, I think it's called, like, Unwoke or something like that.
Oh, wow, real original.
So he's out trying to promote his book. So that's how they're able to end up with this interview. And Ryan obviously had some questions he wanted to ask him about his unconditional support for Israel, even as they're committing all of these atrocities in Gaza. Let's take a listen to a little bit of how that went.
When you see leftists chanting from the river to the sea, that means from the Jordan River to the sea. It literally means obliterate the modern state of Israel because they hate Israel and they want to eliminate the only Jewish nation in the world. That is racist and genocidal. Now, you asked earlier, would I ban that statement? No, I'd allow people to say it. You know, members of the squad have tweeted out from the river to the sea. But the answer, I'd allow them to say it, but I wouldn't sit there quietly. I'd point out that you are calling for, once again, the extermination of millions of Jews.
As I'm sure you know, though, in Likud's platform, it says, from the river to the sea, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. Are they suggesting genocide of all Palestinians?
Of course not.
Exactly. So if they're not, why is the other suggesting genocide?
Because that's what Hamas supports.
I'm going to read to you a couple of things that we've been hearing from the Israeli government. We've had Defense Minister Gallant. We will eliminate everything. An IDF spokesperson. Our focus is on damage, not on precision. Agriculture Minister Avi Dichter. We are now rolling out the Gaza Nakba. Gaza Nakba 2023. That's how it'll end. Israeli Heritage Minister Amahai Eliyahu said a nuclear bomb is, quote, one of the possibilities. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, we need sterile zones in the West Bank. Israeli President Isaac Herzog, it's an entire nation out there that is responsible. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime. Another former Knesset member, there is one and only solution, which is to completely destroy Gaza before invading it. I mean destruction, like what happened in Dresden and Hiroshima without nuclear weapons. Would you join us in condemning that as well?
So I condemn nothing that the Israeli government is doing. I stand with the people of Israel, and let me explain. There is a qualitative difference. The Israeli government does not target civilians. They target military targets. The Israeli government
has so bad at their targeting then, if they're killing so many civilians?
So they're actually not. They are.
So then they are targeting.
No, they're exceptionally good at.
So what I love about that clip is that Ryan is asking the world's most obvious questions, and Ted Cruz is clearly like kind of caught off guard, and his way to handle it is just like total denial, right? So from the river to the sea point, that's genocidal. How dare they say that? And Ryan Grimm's like, well, the Likud platform says the same thing. He's like, it's perfectly fine.
Right.
It's like, wait,
It's
wait,
like-
what? It either is or it isn't. But look, to Ted Cruz, he thinks like, no, all that land should be Israel. You know, he probably thinks the West Bank shouldn't be Palestinian and Gaza shouldn't be Palestinian either.
In a certain sense, you know, conservatives like Ted Cruz, they have an easier time defending their position on just unconditional support for Israel because they don't have to pretend like they care about human rights the way that Democrats do. And so there's just like, yeah, of course I support. I don't care if they're doing war crimes. I support everything that they're doing right now. Like, how can you possibly say that?
But there was also, but he also does lie like the Democrats do, because there was just something that was the biggest lie I've ever heard in there, which is when he said, oh, Israel's only targeting military targets. Ryan Grimm just read for you statements where they were like, we love targeting civilians. And he was like, oh, they don't target civilians.
Yeah.
And it's like, so even he's lying. Even he's not like, I want to wipe out the civilian population and that's what they're doing. He's just lying about the nature of what they're doing. And just to put it in perspective for everybody, and all you know this, but there's been 20,360 Palestinians killed. Of those, according to Euromed Monitor, the human rights group, 18,940 of them are civilians, and over 8,000 of them are children.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, how can he just say such a... It's insane. I mean, Ryan Grimm's comments were like, we are going to do the new Nakba. And Ted Cruz is like, that's perfectly fine. I don't think anything wrong with that. It's like, do you not know what the Nakba is?
Right. Well, and I love how Ryan caught him too, because he says, oh, they're not targeting civilians. They're just military targets. And Ryan's like, well, then why are they so bad at their targeting if they're killing so many civilians? And then Ted Cruz is like, oh, no, actually, they're great at their targeting. So then they are targeting civilians. No. He goes on to say they do more than even the U.S. military in making sure that civilians aren't targeted. I think you were shared on this new article that just came out about how they have intentionally ramped up the level of indiscriminate killing. It actually is discriminate. It is intentionally designed to wreak civilian death, to cause mass civilian death, because they want to send a message of shock and they want the civilian population to turn on Hamas. Like, this is intentional. It is true. They're good at targeting. They know exactly what they're doing. They've now been aided by these like monstrous AI programs that help them to target residential homes, apartment high-rise buildings, schools, refugee camps, churches, mosques. And it's not like, oh, we did our best to avoid civilian casualties. It's like, no, we knew that baby was there. We knew that 3-year-old was there. We knew that high-rise apartment building was filled with people at the time that we dropped that bomb, and we meant to do it that way. So to deny that that is just to deny reality of what is actually unfolding here. But for someone like Ted Cruz, he just does not care at all. There's not even an attempt to pretend like he really cares about this. He says this, oh yeah, they're most humane, et cetera, et cetera. But how can you just make this blanket statement of I support absolutely everything that Israel has done?
It's genuinely embarrassing. Like, it's cuckish. He wouldn't even say that if we're doing a new mission in Iraq, for example. He would be more critical of that, of the U.S. military, than he would be of the Israeli military.
Right.
It's like astonishing. And by the way, general rule of thumb for everybody, of course, I've been saying for the longest time now that Israel's killing these civilians on purpose. How do I know that? Guys, it's over a 90% civilian death rate. That doesn't happen as an oopsie.
Right.
Like, you could kind of maybe see it if, like, 1 out of every 10 people, 10%, maybe you go, okay, they're trying, but, you know, they're missing, and 1 out of every 10 is not great, but I could see how maybe you're trying to target Hamas or whatever. Once you get into like 2 out of 10, it's like, now you're really pushing it. 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10, and by the way, that's it. Hamas targeted, I believe it was 45% civilians, 55% military. So you're telling me the IDF has worse aim and worse human rights standards than Hamas? And it's like, no, they're doing it. Of course they're doing it on purpose.
Right.
Guys, they bombed, I mean, shit. I would give you the list, but just think of every sort of civilian infrastructure you can come up with, right? UN buildings, schools, hospitals, apartment buildings, factories, ambulances, health clinics. Like, what are we talking about here?
Sewage treatment, water, all of it. I mean, northern Gaza is destroyed. It's uninhabitable. It is uninhabitable. Gaza City, home to more than 1 million people, completely uninhabitable. It's absolutely insane. I mean, even the New York Times was like, this is a scale of civilian death that we have not seen in modern history.
Of course.
The amount of women and children, just women and children, killed in the Gaza Strip thus far, understanding this military operation is far from over, the number killed thus far is equivalent to the number of civilians that we killed in all 20 years of Afghanistan. That's what we're talking about here. So it's just astonishing. I mean, Ted Cruz, like, you know, this guy is the lowest of the low. Nothing should shock you. And yet it still is shocking to see such indiscriminate death. Thousands of babies, children, women, the elderly, the entire Gaza Strip just, you know, devastated. And that's just dismissed and defended.
Yeah.
And if you don't sufficiently condemn Hamas, though, then you're a terrorist. If you're chanting for a ceasefire, then you're a terrorist sympathizer, you're a Hamas sympathizer, et cetera.
And by the way, Mr. Fiscal conservatives, I'm going to watch our deficit and our debt and pinch every penny. That's who this guy is. And never would he say a word about, hey, maybe we shouldn't give tens of billions of dollars every year to Israel so they can carry out massacres like this. Never. He would lose it if you suggest, hey, maybe we shouldn't be giving Israel a tremendous amount of money and weapons.
True.
It's just, like go move there. Why don't you go represent Israel, you absolute cuck. Pathetic.